Welcome to Moments in Leadership. Thank you to all the Supercast supporters, especially Lieutenant Colonel Todd Lipka with a monthly support at the hot wash level, and Colonel Select Cameron McCoy with a really nice donation to the project as well. Thank you both for helping keep this project going and making it free for emerging leaders. If you've been listening for a while and you haven't joined yet, I'd love for you to consider supporting the show through the Supercast project. Your donations go directly towards offsetting the personal expenses I carry to produce this project, and they keep it free of commercials, which is important to me. Supporters also get each episode drop early, and if you have any suggestions on how I can increase the value of being a supporter, please drop me an email at themilloffice@gmail.com. I'm serious, every contribution really makes a difference, and I really appreciate each and every one of you who donate on a monthly basis and one-off. I'm especially honored today because this guest is someone I've known for nearly 2 decades. Major General Matt Smith, United States Army retired. Over a distinguished career rising through command from platoon to theater, from leading troops in combat to being a senior voice in the Pentagon decision-making, Matt has carried the weight of leadership in some of the toughest moments. Today, he leads the Master in Business for Veterans program at Emory University's Goizeta Business School, a degree which is built specifically for veterans, active duty, National Guard, and Reserve leaders who are transitioning to civilian business roles. I had the chance recently to visit his class and serve on a panel and talk with some students about my own transition and running Monument Wealth Management for 20 years. I want to tell you a little more about the program because many of you listening are exactly who it's designed for. It's an 11-month accelerated degree built just for veterans, active duty, Guard, Reserve, service members who want to translate their military leadership into business success. You'll kick things off with a boot camp to get grounded in business fundamentals, and then you'll meet every other weekend, generally Friday and Saturday, with your cohort to dig into subjects like finance, marketing, data analytics, operations, and leadership. Along the way, you'll get one-on-one mentoring with someone who's been where you are, and you'll build a real actionable career plan. The format is flexible enough to respect your obligations, and there's a strong network of veteran classmates and alumni. As someone who's gone through the transition and built a business, I can tell you the value of having a community and a structure like this is hard to overstate. Now, in this episode, we'll dig into lessons from combat, crisis response, civil unrest, moral courage under pressure, and what standards endure when everything around you shakes. Major General Matt Smith, United States Army retired, commissioned as an infantry officer after graduating from the University of Delaware in 1993. After serving on active duty, he joined the Georgia Army National Guard, where he commanded at every level from company to brigade. He led soldiers in both Iraq and Afghanistan, including commanding a battalion in Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom, and later commanding the 48th Infantry Brigade Combat Team during its deployment in support of Operation Resolute Support. His senior assignments included serving as a Vice Director of Operations at the National Guard Bureau and ultimately as the commander of Joint Task Force North. General Smith has also served in a wide variety of staff and operational roles throughout his career, and he's a graduate of the Army War College, the Ranger Course, Airborne and Air Assault Schools, and numerous other Army leadership programs. He holds an MBA from Emory University's Goizeta Business School, where he now serves as the executive director of the Master in Business for Veterans program, a degree which I said is specifically designed for military leaders transitioning into business. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Major General Matt Smith. Welcome, now retired Major General Matt Smith, U.S. Army, now just Matt Smith. Mr. Right. So I always laugh when I get introduced to civilians that work at the Pentagon and they go by Mr. I feel like if I had a civilian job and I was working at the Pentagon, I'd be like, dude, just call me Dave.
Right.
Like, what's with the Mr.,
And I know we'll talk about it later, but like students now at the place that I work are like, sir, what do you want me to call you? I said, whatever you think your career can handle,
That's it. I'm going to use that one. That's a great one. It's interesting because I think we get so indoctrinated in the military of, even when you're retired, there are people that will call me, so it just happened today. And I'm like, all right, I am Dave. I just don't need to hold on to that. And I get it. Everybody's sort of conditioned to be respectful. And that's great. Like I will still address people, especially if I don't know them.
Yeah. Well, for leader, you do know that. I know you know this. It's not about the position. It's about who you are as a person.
Right.
Right. And, there's books written about how you get into trouble when you define yourself by what you do.
Yeah.
And that goes double once you retire.
Right.
If it's, the more senior you are, arguably, the harder that is if you're kind of misoriented.
Yeah. My peer group are all out, basically. Some dead. If they're still in, they have been selected for 3rd star. They're in the 1 to 3 star range right now, right? I was talking to one of my buddies the other day. He's an infantry Marine general. And he was talking about, I was serving on this committee or something. And I had to pull a couple colonels who were at each other's throats on something. And I think to myself, when I think about a full bird colonel, right? I think like my MEU commander, like that was,
this guy's a god.
There's one guy in the whole MEU. He's running the whole thing. Right. And then you think about these like settings where they're at each other's throats and they got to be like, separated by a general.
Exactly. Well, you've probably seen this. Like my observation of our beloved uniformed military is anytime you group a bunch of similar ranked people together, they devolve to like E1s.
Well, like a TBS for all the second lieutenants in the Marine Corps, right? Or OBC.
I can only imagine it's happening right now in the capstone course, for the.
Well, that's great. So you're retired. For listeners, Matt and I have had a previous conversation where we went for about an hour and we ran out of time, and we promised each other we would get back together and discuss the rest of your career post battalion command, which we're gonna do. But if you haven't heard that episode, I don't think it's necessary that they go back and hear it before they listen to this. But do make sure you go back and listen to, because there's some pretty good stories in there. But when we left off, you were about to start a job at the Pentagon, working as the division chief for the National Guard Bureau, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Boy, that must have been a lot of fun, working in the Pentagon as the division chief for the National Guard Bureau. Gosh, you got some stories there?
So first, I'll give you the why, right? So again, back to Dave's point, everybody, about listening to the first episode. So I was like an active Guard reserve guy in the Georgia Guard, and had come back from battalion command deployment in eastern Afghanistan, and went, as most combat arms people do, into the G3 shop in this case for the state, but it would have been, and if you're on active duty in the Marines or the Army, it would have been the division G3 shop. Right. And contemplated how many years of active duty I had left to serve till I could retire, because I had a break in service prior to 9/11 happening. And thought to myself, I can't do this for that many more years. I have to find something else to do. So I threw my hat in the ring and I said, hey, send me to the 5-sided puzzle palace for 2 years. And in retrospect, it was an awesome experience because of the things I got involved in, and relatively unique for a National Guardsman in the Army National Guard anyway, from a state to go up to the Pentagon, do 2 years of jointness, and then go back to another tactical unit, which is how the Marines and the Army do it for the active duty force, but it's unusual in the National Guard. Yeah. So it was really pretty neat.
That's cool. You dealt with some budget stuff, though. You were telling me. That must be pretty interesting, because one of the things that I have gone off on a tangent about on a few episodes is where I say, one of the hardest things to assess when you're in the military leading something is how successful is what you just did if it's really hard to measure it. And I'll just make up an example. You take your unit to the field and you do some sort of, we're going to do 2 up, 1 back, whatever it is. And your measurement of success is, I didn't break anything and nobody got hurt. Right. But you really don't know if what you just trained for had any sort of
if you were effective.
Success, right? Yeah. In the civilian world, you measure everything with dollars and cents. And now all of a sudden, here you are in this job actually seeing dollars and cents for your first times in 2006.
Like real quantities of money.
Right. Which are probably pretty significant. Like, do you have any sort of, this isn't really a leadership question, but it's sort of like a, did you know question, or, hey, let me share something that I just kind of shocked me.
I'll give you 2 quick stories. One was being in a 3-star level budget meeting for the next year's president's budget submission, led by a politically appointed civilian who was very young, bunch of 3 stars from all the services sitting around the table. I was up against the wall in the cheap seats, obviously.
This is the end of the Obama administration, beginning of the Trump administration. Trump one.
Not the end of Obama. It was 20. It would have been the 2015 budget. I can't remember.
Okay.
How the presidents line up. We'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So Trump was 16 to 20 for his first.
So second half of last quarter of Obama.
Okay.
Right. And the Navy gentleman at some point said, I just don't know how we're going to do it for $680 billion. Billion. Which is a pittance compared to what the DoD budget is now. But as a guy who came from the great state of Georgia and who actually spent some time like earning my own living as a stockbroker.
Yeah.
That's a pretty amazing thing to hear someone say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what I could do with $680.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. And then later in that same tour, 2-year kind of joint tour, at some point I was a little more salty at that point because I saw my exit strategy out of the Pentagon. So I was in some other meeting and something else. I can't remember what the subject was, but somebody said something about, we need $25 million for something. And again, a civilian leader at the table was like, that's just budget dust. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and do it.
Right.
And I, at some point said, hey, if we actually like swept up the budget dust around here, it's more than most departments get in the federal government.
Yeah, budget dust.
And the lady like looked at me and was like, Matt, shut up. And the meeting just continued, But there's that kind of, I think the leadership lesson perhaps for your listeners, Dave, is we as leaders have indirect, but we have a fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers who provide our department with significant amounts of resources, and we should use it prudently. I'm sure the Marines would never do this, but I can remember as a company grade officer having a mad minute at the end of a live fire because nobody wanted to turn in the ammo.
Right. God, that has nothing. Okay. You're going to get me off on a tangent.
I bet.
Right. It's like, once it's unbanded, nobody wants to turn it in. So
you get into actually another leadership place, like you get into incentive systems and how do I incentivize the desired behavior? Well, if you make the turn in so painful that the supply sergeant doesn't want to do it, and then you ding the unit next quarter's ammo forecast because they turned in.
Yeah.
What type of behavior is that incentivized?
And I mean, I'm not saying this happened. Okay. It's possible. But I remember when I was a battery commander and there was an ammo snafu because one unit, an Anglico unit, was going to come and shoot their annual allotment of artillery. And so they basically gave it to us to shoot for them. And they were going to send people up. And then the exercise got canked at the last minute for something. I think air fell out or whatever, but the ammo was there. And we ended up with, I think it was like 800 rounds for a drill weekend, which is like the annual allotment probably. Right. And I'm like, man, well, it's September, guys. And, but that didn't really happen. I made that whole story up. What's the statute of limitations?
7 years usually.
Yeah, okay. I'm good.
We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah. You got a good story coming up. You also worked on the retirement system.
I did. That's not necessarily a leadership subject, but
but let's not let leadership get in the way of a good story, right?
So I'm, sitting in my cube one day in the Pentagon, because for those that haven't had the opportunity, if you're a colonel or an 06, a captain in the Navy, and you're working in the Pentagon, you work in a cube. Anywhere else, to your point, you're the king of your own or queen of your own domain, and you go up there and you can't swing a dead cat without hitting an 06.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there doing email or something. My boss walks up with like this 4-inch thick binder that would stop a 7.62 round at close range. And he's like, hey, Matt, you have an MBA, right? I'm like, yes, sir, I do. He throws the binder at me and goes, okay, you're our rep for the rehab of the retirement system now.
Wow.
And that like consumed the next year of my life.
Wow. Yeah.
But it was interesting because there's not a lot of people in the Department of Defense that have a business background of any type.
Most people that get out and get their MBAs stay out.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah.
I was talking to a bunch of Rangers a couple of weeks ago who are transitioning out. It's a tough crowd.
Yeah.
They don't suffer fools too easily. And one of them
lots of good haircuts.
Yeah. Not as good as they used to be, but anyway. And then one of the young men says, "Hey, sir, well, why a business degree?" And I was like, "Hey, Ranger, there's 3 things in my observation that shape human interaction on the face of the earth: war, religion, and business."
Yeah.
I said, "You got the war part down? I don't see you going into theology."
Right.
So you may want to think about
Business. Yeah.
For your listeners, some of them at some point are going to pursue higher education. I, for years, thought I had made a terrible investment because I went back on active duty after getting this degree because of 9/11. And my wife, who Dave's known longer than I have, was like, "Nope, it's changed how you think. You just can't tell yet."
Right.
So from a diversity of thought standpoint, which is a leadership thing,
yeah,
it did change how I approach problems at literally the strategic level. And it turned out in the end to be pretty helpful.
My MBA was really helpful too. I mean, it was the first time I had to learn how to work on a project with people without the Uniform Code of Military Justice or the chain of command.
Yeah, you can't knife hand them.
You got to get everybody to get along and do what they're supposed to do without the luxury of rank or orders. But it was interesting. You moved on from there to brigade command of the 48th Infantry Brigade Combat Team. That's a light infantry unit, right?
Exactly.
But you were attached to the 3rd ID?
Yes.
And is that a
in
mech?
Georgia? That is a mechanized armored division. Still is. And so as a Georgia Guardsman, I was left DC, went back to Georgia, got the privilege of commanding at the 06 level and this infantry brigade combat team. And at the time, the Department of the Army was doing a readiness experiment, figured out, hey, we got some units that are in close proximity, so we'll pair them up. So we became the 48th IBCT, became the kind of 3rd maneuver brigade of the 3rd Infantry Division. Okay. So they had 2 heavy brigades, us, obviously, and then aviation brigade, field artillery, and all together, this sustainment enterprise.
So for my Marine friends out there, same thing as a regiment for us.
Yeah.
Essentially bigger though. So what was in an infantry brigade combat team when you had it? What were the maneuver elements?
Yeah.
And then what were the supporting elements that you had in a brigade?
So I always organized them by sequence of employment because that's how I could keep them straight, right? Okay. So we had a reconnaissance squadron, a CAV squadron.
Okay. And is that an aviation asset?
No.
Okay.
Light and Humvee. So dismounted and
that's
Humvee.
Right. Okay.
Two mounted, 1 dismounted. And direct support field artillery battalion.
Okay. 05s? 105s?
2 batteries of
119ers?
Yeah, 119ers, 105 millimeter, and then 1 battery of 777.
Oh, you did have a battery 777. Yeah. Okay.
And then 3 rifle battalions.
Okay.
Of 9 rifle companies each.
Okay.
And then, no, I'm sorry, it was 9 rifle companies. 3, sorry. It's been a while. And then the sustainment enterprise, so the support battalion with the medical, obviously the maintenance, and then the all the other classes of supply.
Okay.
And then kind of a catch-as-catch-can that at the time was referred to as the Brigade Engineer Battalion, which is a little bit of a misnomer. Engineer headquarters had 2 engineer sapper companies, but also had the communications company and the MI and military intelligence company for the brigade. So 7 battalions.
Yeah, wow.
A lot. The Army, at least, has changed how it organizes those things since then. I left that in calendar year 20. but it was a pretty awesome experience to learn how to, or I shouldn't say learn, I should say try to learn how to employ all that stuff in a meaningful way.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned, or maybe some of the leadership circumstances that you faced as a colonel? Because like, I think by the time you're a brigade commander, you've got battalion commanders who they got 20 years, right?
Yes, exactly.
So like, what sort of leadership challenges exist at the 06 level where you're like banging your head against the wall? Like, I can't believe that people with 20 years in are causing me these kind of headaches, or maybe they didn't. You're not dealing with the Marines having an inspection or the soldiers having his play. You're not dealing with the little stuff.
Yeah.
You're dealing with big leadership problems. What were some of those?
So a couple things come to mind, right? So for your listeners, in terms of learning from your guests, my hope is that your listeners always have a better life than I did because of my own mistakes.
Well, that's why I love having this project, right? Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind is not necessarily a problem, but it's just something to think about, which is how, as a leader, does your style change when you go from leading a rifle battalion at the time? I think even task organized in Afghanistan was like 1,200 people,
right,
jammed into one province, right? That brigade was like, by org chart, was like just under 5,000, I think, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
You can't lead the same way. Our books, our manuals talk about indirect leadership. That's what that's about, right? But I think you gotta think about that before you do it. You owe it to the subordinates, right?
Yeah.
The way that manifested for me on day one, literally, was in how I delivered my initial counseling to my rated population, basically the first sergeants and above, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just to contrast from my own previous style, there was a lot less knife hand and a lot fewer F-bombs.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because
you're not talking to a rifle battalion. I'm talking to all those 7 different kinds. Yeah, 3 of them are rifle battalions, but they're different.
Yeah.
All of those units are so different.
I also have to imagine that at that level, you are on the precipice of moving from tactical leadership to executive leadership.
Yeah.
When you're an 06 colonel captain, like you are now on trial for, do you have the executive leadership skills to become a general officer and start leading the enterprise? It's not, you're not part of the system, you are the system kind of thing that people say, like,
we or they.
So, right. So there's also that component of it where you're expected to not knife hand, like you've got to show your executive leadership skills, which you've had 0 training for, right? Or zero experience training for, right?
Yeah.
Probably go to some polishing schools and things like that. But
and then to your point, so it's not a problem, it's just kind of a condition of the operating environment, is it chronologically and experience-wise, I wasn't that far ahead of the battalion commander. It was just a couple of years, maybe 3.
Right.
You get to go to a war college. I did the DC tour. I did a year at the G3 shop. But they're effectively peers, and by battalion command, your right-hand man or woman is at about the same experience. That's very different than being in a battery or a company.
How old are you when you're a brigade commander? Like late 40s?
Mid
40s. Yeah,
But so the real challenge, I think, is how can I help those command teams with their direct reports from companies, batteries, and troops? Because that gap is significant.
Yeah.
Right. And many of us have experienced that. That's like a generational difference,
Yeah.
And I'll tell a quick funny story. So we're in this kind of auditorium at the brigade headquarters, and I'm doing my thing with my slides. Hey, this is what I'm about. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the next, couple of years for the organization. And at some point, I'm like, any questions? And one of the salty first sergeants, which is redundant, says, "Hey, sir, how are we going to deal with these kids today? These new recruits, they're weak, they're, whatever, add disparaging comments in a rant type format.
Right. The rant that has been going on for the past 250 years.
So to your point, I say to him, well, First Sergeant, I don't have to deal with them. I only have to deal with these guys up here in the front row. And I'm thankful for that because that's hard. But that's why we got guys like you. I would just point out that I'm pretty sure in some company area somewhere in like 1920, there were a bunch of World War I vets sitting around complaining about the new wet behind the ears recruits. Right. We now call them the greatest generation.
Exactly, right. It's sort of like the drill instructors at Paris Island would say, how are we going to teach these kids to get ready for combat if we can't march them through Ribbon Creek?
Right, exactly. It's like somehow this has been happening probably for millennia.
Right. In
some form or fashion, but everything generally went okay. So he figured it out.
Right. What were some lessons that you learned in brigade command as it related to relationships with the sergeant's major or that sort of sphere of enlisted influence?
So I think brigade or regimental command for the Marines is the second opportunity you have with that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So it provided me a chance to double down on the things that worked well in terms of command team responsibilities or how you divide and conquer or how you don't divide and conquer, just how you riff off of each other, and to correct some of the things that maybe didn't go as well. Because, most officers don't get 2 battalion commands. I guess some do every once in a while.
Rarely.
Very rarely. Yeah. So it's like you get a brigade or regiment opportunity. That is your chance to make good on those lessons learned from the 05 command opportunity in terms of the relationship with the senior NCO.
Yeah. Okay. This is an off the cuff question, but did you have a favorite command? You don't need to say which one it is. Okay. But did you have you're like, oh, I love going down and seeing the guys from XYZ unit.
Yes.
So did you overstay your welcome there a little bit too much?
So that's actually a great point to bring up for the listeners. I spent most of my time with the parts of the brigade that I had the least experience with.
Okay. So out of curiosity, or was it personality driven?
Well, I felt like I had a duty to learn how to do this right.
Yeah. Okay.
So what are the considerations for the employment of a field artillery battalion in full spectrum operations or combat, whatever we're calling it today? The Cav squadron, and how do you synchronize what they're doing with the field artillery and or the ground guys that are coming after, the entirety of the logistics enterprise, which, it actually turns out if there's anything we do well, it's that.
Yeah.
Across the joint force. And then all the eaches, right? Like communications and all the different systems and where do you put stuff for maximum effectiveness? Not like killing effectiveness, but like technical effectiveness, I found all of that to be the most interesting. At that point in my career, I could have been a pretty good rifle company commander. Yeah. So I didn't feel like I needed to go supervise those guys, because turns out the battalion commanders are also pretty good rifle company commanders.
Right. Poor company commanders.
Yeah. But to your question, I would have, just because of common experiences, I would have been much more comfortable going and hanging out with the rifle battalion guys. It's not like I didn't ever, I did. I just tried to weight my time and effort with the guys and gals that I didn't understand as much about, which is a humbling thing to do.
Right.
But I think it made me better in the end.
I reflect back on it. I think myself, when I was there's actually a really funny story about this I won't tell, but when I was a battery commander, I didn't want anybody from higher being around.
Hell no.
Right. But here's what I learned. This is what every time I fought them coming down, what I ended up realizing later was they weren't coming down to get in my ass about stuff. They were coming down there because they wanted to be around. They wanted to come down there and have fun.
Yes.
And I looked at it as they're coming down here to nitpick and find everything wrong.
So I think yes, but As one of my friends who did pretty well for himself in his military career said, everything's an inspection.
I know, right?
So there is
Mhm.
definitely an aspect of, oh man, I just want to be down with the gun line.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But while you're down there, you're kind of looking around at how everything's organized and is it dressed right dressed and just that kind of thing. Because you don't time, as I think I said in the last episode, our most precious commodity. If we use it wisely, it means even the humans, get to live longer or not get injured or whatever. Our services will send more stuff if we break it or get it destroyed. They'll even send more humans if we need them to. But the time you never get back, and that's related.
Yeah.
So you can't waste any of it, even though there is an aspect of, hey, I just want to be with the guys on the front line and girls on the front line.
If I had ever become a general officer, I think one of the things that everybody would have hated about me would be like, if I was driving along in the duty van or something like that, and I saw some Marines like doing something, I'd probably want to stop and just talk, just talk to them, And so I asked one of my general buddies, I said, do you ever just like pop into a unit and be like, hey, just coming by to say hi? He's like, no way, man. He's like, dude, you will just kick a beast, because everybody's like, the general's here and all that stuff. He's like, you just can't do that.
Yeah. So I got some wise advice back to your point about the senior NCO Corps from a sergeant major who said, sir, don't go to the range right when they're going hot. I was like, okay, but what are you talking about? He goes, nobody wants to look screwed up in front of the big boss.
Yeah, right.
And invariably, something will go wrong. And
Always
if you show up, that's when it'll go wrong. So let them get their legs under them before you show up.
Right. And if they don't see something big wrong, they're just going to keep looking until they find that one soldier or Marine without the chin strap properly buckled. And the next thing you know, all hell's breaking loose. Yeah. Did you get down to the artillery units a lot for live fire? Did you? Did they make you bite the swab and all that stuff?
No.
Or did you escape that?
I don't know what
somebody
that is.
Took pity on you.
Yeah.
I guess general officers get away with being down on the gun line and not having to do that.
I was just a colonel back then.
Right. No, that's right. Sorry. Right.
They would let me pull the lanyard from time to time, which for an infantry guy is a pretty big deal.
It is a big deal. It's actually, that's pretty cool. Make that thing go boom.
It is. Especially I didn't fall for the trick on the smoke, chief of smoke, whatever you call him.
Yeah, we call
it.
It
was like, hey, why don't you sit here, sir? And I was like, oh, no. I know what's going to happen when I sit there and they pull the lanyard.
Right. Exactly. Well, at least nobody sent you off to find the sight glass water in the bubble pump. But yeah.
Exactly.
So when you were deployed in Afghanistan with the brigade, did your artillery move around? It's a quick artillery sidebar.
A little bit. I mean, we for most of that time, we were the only combat brigade in Afghanistan. That was in 2019, early 2019. So we would sling load gun sections around at different fire bases and stuff, depending on the operational pace of whatever in different parts of the country.
That's cool artillery training.
It was cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of at least in the East, a lot of those are at high altitude. So, it was pretty interesting.
You were a reserve. That's my Marine talking
there.
Okay. National Guard brigade commander in an active duty division, essentially, right?
Yes.
3rd ID.
Yes.
What were some of the things that you learned about as it related to cultural dynamics, or what did they learn from you? The active duty, like meshed together and something.
So I'll tell you 2 funny stories to answer both those questions. So the first one I found a little surprising, right? So we were at command and staff, which I was expected to be at, at the division headquarters. The division was doing something on base where they needed to move brigades worth of soldiers from one side of the base to the other. And it was in the cantonment area. It wasn't out in the field.
Right.
And the division staff and the commander and the other brigade commanders are just getting tied into knots about how we're going to get these thousands and thousands of troops from here to there. And I was like, hey, why don't you just tell them where to be and when and see what happens? Joe's going to figure it out.
Right.
And they were like, we can't possibly do that. And I was like, I think you guys are missing an opportunity. This is the epitome of mission command as a philosophy.
Intent.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, you're going to have to devote a lot less calories to it at echelon,
Right.
to try and solve the problem. Now they kept on nugging on it, and I presumably came up with some buses or deuce and a halves or something to move all these guys. The kind of overarching sentiment I had was surprise at the kind of, I don't know if patriarchal is the right word or not, but the wanting to care for every aspect of all these humans. For me as a guard guy, 39 companies, batteries, and troops spread across 28 locations diagonally across the great state of Georgia, 400 miles between the furthest tips of that. So I could never, ever do something without employing individual initiative. I don't
there's
know
no
if
way.
that,
Yeah, it does.
So it was like, in retrospect, it was great training for going to Afghanistan and having guys at 34 locations around the country.
Just mentally, you were used to it.
Yeah, my frame of reference was completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was, and I talked with the division commander about it afterwards.
Yeah.
I think it was good for both of us. And that could be extrapolated, I think, to anybody in terms of understanding what somebody's experience is that creates their frame of reference as a leader and how that informs their judgment.
Yeah.
Right. And then you could launch into a whole separate podcast session about diversity of thought and teams and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Because it just it changed that gentleman and it changed me in terms of better understanding each other.
I'll bet. Yeah.
From a pride standpoint, something that happened during that process, we were doing the ramp up to go to the Joint Readiness Training Center. So we had everybody out in the field. We're doing company live fires and things like that. I'm walking, I think it was a platoon live fire lane with one of my counterparts from the division who was providing all the support. So his brigade was supporting our exercise. And we go through the AR with this platoon and we both say our piece at the end of the AR. And then he and I are walking away and he goes, Matt, those guys should be better given where they are in their training cycle. And I said, well, why do you say that? He's like, well, this, that, the other. I'm like, well, how many days a year do you have access to your brigade? And he goes, 365.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we're doing like a 3-week annual training this year. So I have those guys for 45 days that they're in uniform and I can influence them as soldiers. I said, do you think your rifle platoons are 8 times better than those guys? And he goes, nope. When you put it like that, they look pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But all that to say, and this went to a comment Dave made to me before we turned on the microphones, I think, especially for leaders in the reserve components of our services, back to the time aspect that I talked about as being the most precious commodity. If you focus on the basics, that's going to do you pretty well in the long term. I had a friend and mentor say to me many, many years ago, he goes, Matt, you know what Delta Force does really well? I said, no. He goes, we change magazines really well. And that was the analogy for focus on the basics. That's all you got to do.
Right.
And that kind of stayed with me over the years.
Yeah. You and I, our unique experience in the reserve component, National Guard, I'll call it the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer group of people. There's no time to mess around. There is no time. And you look at what an active duty unit does. I mean, they do PT and they do classes and they do stand downs and they do maintenance and we still have to do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You just get really good at not messing around and getting it done, Yeah.
I'll tell you, so the downside of that, this is interesting. The guy that said this to me, retired as a 3-star, was an Army guy, but regular Army guy. And he goes, this is also for this is for all your listeners, because I was going to say it's for the reserve component folks, but it's also for those active duty folks in Combo 1 of all the services who are going to work with or have reserve component folks working for them. Because we're so geographically isolated in the reserves, we just get used to just making it happen. To your point, right? I got a lot of stuff to get done. I don't have much time to do it. The next higher headquarters is who knows how far away. So I'm just going to have to figure it out, which is great for developing initiative within limits. Right. So this gentleman said to me as he was leaving Afghanistan, he was my boss at the time. He goes, "Matt, you guys have really paid us some very nice compliments." And this was back in 10. He goes, "I'll tell you what's incredible is watching you guys just figure it out. It's really a strength of the unit."
Yeah.
He goes, "I'll tell you what's the biggest weakness is not knowing when to ask for help." And I thought that was a great comment.
Yeah, I go back to my own experience, and an artillery battery or an artillery battalion will only have its firing batteries go out to the field 4 times a year, 4 drill weekends a year, and everything else is Marine Corps birthday ball or PFT or whatever it is,
Right.
this kind of stuff, maintenance, things like that. And so 4 times a year, this artillery battalion, headquartered in my case in Philadelphia, would have a unit in Richmond, Virginia, getting on I-95 and going to the training area. You've got Mike Battery down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is as far away from the CP as you can get.
Right.
Is driving 5 hours to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and all the other batteries. Now you think about an artillery battalion commander on active duty going to the regimental commander and say, "Okay, I've got all 4 of my batteries going to the field. Each one is driving a separate direction, 3, 4, 5 hours on whatever highway."
You're like, "What are you talking
doing
about?"
this, right? And they're leaving on Friday morning. They're coming back on Sunday, and they're going to shoot 150 rounds. They're going to do
Right.
an active duty guy would be like, "Whoa!
Yeah.
Talk to me about the safety matrix of that. What'd you call it? The risk
risk
management matrix, right? Whatever it was.
Risk mitigation control measures.
Right. The thing that you pencil whipped every single drill weekend because you didn't have time to do that kind of stuff, right? And meanwhile, that battalion commander up there in Philadelphia is like, "Great, everybody just check in with me and let me know what's going on." And we had this problem getting up to Fort Campbell where the Humvees had to stop and refuel. I think it was the Humvees had the smaller, right? So they had to refuel.
Sure.
So I asked the battalion to send me like a refueler, like temp loan me a refuel, like drive it down. So we eventually get this refueler down there that we didn't rate as a battery, but the battalion did. But So don't even ask me how we got somebody qualified to run that thing, like licensed, whatever. But they did.
What
Somebody
could possibly
did,
go
right?
wrong?
Figured it out. And we just pulled over on the side of the road, and I ran everybody through Jeffy Mart style off the refueler thing. And so the next
Class 3 bulk upload. Right?
And so the battalion commander said, like, "Hey, how did that refueler work out?" I said, "Great. We pulled off to the side of the road." He goes, "Wait, what? You pull?" I said, "Well, it was a truck stop. Like, I mean, we were safely off the road and everything." He's like, "Well, what'd you do for like hazmat blanket and all this other stuff?" And I go, "Hey, sir, I don't know. We just pulled up to that thing like it was a Sunoco station. We pumped the gas and we were on the road, like we were out of there, But necessity is the mother of all invention, So
for your broader listeners, depending on where they fall in the pantheon of our Department of Defense, there's a lot of questions right there that you ask the next time you get task organized with.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you're reserves or active duty, and whether the person you're working for is the other, there's just a lot to unpack there before you start operating.
Yeah. So having all those units spread all over the state, I mean, that must have been this isn't going to sound like a good way to say it, but like there's no way you could have had control of all of that yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you have to trust, right? And when that was violated, it had to be dealt with sometimes very severely. Fortunately, I had a chain of command above me that was willing to do that. And that became most kind of painful, if you will, or most notable when it involved one of the other AGR soldiers.
Yeah.
So you have somebody who's got the privilege of wearing the uniform 365 days a year. And if they're not meeting the standard in a completely decentralized environment, they have to go because you can't trust them. And the active duty crowd that's listening is like, yeah, obviously. But it's a much more significant thing when you only have a very small number of active duty people and you're like, I want to get rid of one. And here's why.
Because there's nobody getting moved up from another subordinate unit to fill that role. It's just
no. You just got
goes unfilled. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're getting the brigade ready, so this whole decentralized thing, you really can't put your finger on any one thing more than one thing at a time.
Right.
But now you've got to take this brigade to combat. You went to JRTC, right?
We did.
Right. And so that was the first time in a long time that your brigade had gone there. I remember you telling me.
Yeah, we had not been since 2009, which was before the that was first deployment to Afghanistan. So we went to JRTC in 2009, trained up for COIN,
Okay.
which some of your listeners will remember
Oh,
doing either at 29 Palms or NTC or JRTC or wherever. But this rotation, because of the readiness experiment, was a full spectrum, near peer threat kind of situation. And it was the first time, and maybe ever, I don't know, that the brigade had done something like that as a light organization.
Yeah.
JRTC, for the non-Army folks, is the light infantry kind of training location for the Army.
And it's got OPT4.
Yes.
It's like,
they're very
it's
capable.
The final exam.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, they throw all these other assets at you as a brigade. Like you get a task organized aviation organization.
Yeah.
You get all this general support, logistics and all this other stuff that you usually don't have to deal with or have been trained necessarily to deal with. And you got to figure all that out. So it's an incredible crucible.
That was going to be my question. I was setting you up for this question, which was, okay, if that's your final exam, for the lack of a better word, before you LD into the combat zone, right? What were some of the things that you walked out of there saying like, oh shit, I'm worried about that? And what did you do to quickly, was there anything you could do, or did you just say, hey, hope springs eternal and I'm just gonna?
So this one anecdote about a strategic issue is a personal thing, but it illustrates a strategic issue where this one particular night I was co-located with our brigade TAC, so the small part of the brigade command node. And we were so well hidden, like the OCs had to call each other to figure out where we were because it was a really good spot.
Okay.
But at some point, because of either watching vehicle traffic or something, like the OPT4 guys started to get close. And when whatever time it was in the middle of the night that I laid my head on my rucksack, there was an enemy drone overhead looking for us. And I thought, this is very disconcerting.
Yeah.
Because I could hear it,
mm-hmm.
And it was searching it never found the command post, but it was pretty close.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not good. And this is unlike anything that any of us had ever experienced. And that was in 2018.
Yeah.
And, we've all seen what's happened in Eastern Europe since then, Ukraine.
Yeah.
That was an interesting realization. Hey, this near peer thing, this is real. And it's a lot different.
Right.
The kind of silver lining, if you will, is we go to do this full spectrum rotation at JRTC, develop all these processes up and down the organization for how to do that. And then we go to Afghanistan back to, coin and advising and assisting and all that we're doing at the latter years there. Starburst everybody out to 34 locations across Afghanistan. The systems you develop at the high end of combat work at that lower, more decent. It was just a great lesson learned. So if you're training for the high end, there's utility in that for if you do something less than full high end.
Yeah.
How
quickly after JRTC did you go in country?
Less than 6 months.
Oh, okay.
So, guard time, that's a couple weeks.
Right. Yeah.
And we went on active duty and went to Fort Stewart and did a couple, 3, 4, 5 weeks down there, depending on what part of the brigade you were in, before people started cycling to the airfield.
And JRTC was at Fort Polk? It's at
Fort Polk.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it was a great experience now that it's over.
Right. What else from your brigade time was formative for you in the realm of leadership? Lessons learned, your moments in leadership in brigade command.
So we had, not too long after I took over, we got called up by the state to respond to a hurricane.
Okay.
And shame on me, I can't remember the name of the hurricane. It was in August, September of 17, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That, not the doctrinal mission of the organization necessarily, but as guardsmen, it's part of what we do. And the kind of key takeaway for me from that was the importance of the civilian leadership interaction, who you're there to help.
Right.
right? So it's in many ways analogous to the whole coin situation overseas for many, many years, where you're literally dealing with the mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, okay, we need water. That's a pretty important thing. Okay, here's how we're going to do this. Where do you want it? When? How are you going to disseminate it to the citizens and all that kind of stuff? It's very rewarding once you execute it.
Yeah.
You're helping, not quite literally neighbors, but, you're helping in my case, fellow Georgians.
Yeah.
And the soldiers really get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
That's like what they signed up to do. Help their neighbors.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Do something.
Yeah. So that was kind of neat.
It's a great segue into your next role when you, after you came back from Brigade Command, you were Deputy Director of Current Ops for the Army. And I know we could probably do a whole episode on that. I'm just guessing.
Indeed.
Right. But, this was sort of your 2021, 22, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a lot of stuff that went on over that time. I know you told me before you've got a COVID story, but the segue really is you were just talking about the hurricane, but you also have responsibility for DC National Guard when there's civil unrest.
Yes.
And there was.
May of 20, Black Lives Matter.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And maybe January 6th.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were some of the experiences you can share about like that aha moment? Like, I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot of like prep at JRTC for civil unrest in DC. So like, what does the DC National Guard do to prepare for that, if anything? Or were they caught flat? No, I shouldn't say caught flat-footed, but like.
Well, that type of thing, thankfully, had not happened anywhere in our country for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, the LA riots.
Yeah.
The Rodney King situation was probably, I think.
Sounds about right.
And that was in the late 80s, maybe, early 90s.
That was 91.
Yeah. So it'd been a long time, right? And so when the protests started, that's when we at the Headquarters Department of the Army found out that I think it was in 1967, some authority was delegated through a Supreme Court ruling to the Secretary of Defense, and then further subdelegated to the Secretary of the Army for oversight of the DC National Guard, because it's not a state.
Right.
So nobody realized that until all hell was breaking loose, because people were angry.
What is DC National Guard organized as? Light infantry, or is it a support?
They have, I'd be hard pressed to tell you how big it is these days, but they have a smattering of all different types of units, to include the Air Guard. There's an Air Guard also.
Oh yeah, of course.
But it's not like it's not a single IBCT with a intact,
like Georgia
operational command
or
structure.
Virginia, right?
Exactly. So my boss, the director of operations, or the ops director, commonly referred to as the OD, became the right-hand guy for the Secretary of the Army, who had this legal responsibility to oversee this whole thing. It was pretty sporty for a long time. It was literally something that hadn't been done since the late 60s. This is actually a great kind of lesson about the seriousness of the profession of arms, especially for reserve component leaders as you become more senior. So one of the things with that position I was in, it was the most senior, even as a lowly 07, I was the most senior Army Guardsman on the Army staff.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things start happening downtown in DC. My boss and I get summoned to the G357's office, who's a 3-star for all the services. And we sit down on his counter, or on his couch, and it was Charlie Flynn at the time, now General Retired Charlie Flynn. He says, "Okay, Matt, what are we going to do?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, sir?" He goes, "Well, you're the National Guard guy. How do we do this?" I'm like, "Holy cow, this is pretty serious right now." I mean, I didn't say that out loud, and I'm sure he could see it on my face because he's a pretty astute guy and a great boss, I might add. And I kind of flipped to my cheat sheet in my green book of U.S. code and use of the National Guard, right, and the reserves and the regular Army, and then start providing courses of action to the G357 of the Army about how we're going to do this, which was quickly followed by the suggestion that he called the JAG.
Right. Yeah, of course. I think of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And various other senior staff members, because again, we hadn't done this in decades, and it was pretty interesting times, notwithstanding the social context of all of that, and very rewarding, right? But I think the key takeaway to my previous comment for the reserve component listeners is, hey, the situation doesn't care whether you do this 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer.
Well, that's the biggest thing about, right, the reserve.
You got to be
National
able
Guard.
to deliver,
right?
So it was a formative experience to be able to advise at that level for the department, because the Army had the lead, Department of Defense.
Yeah.
Certainly for the Department of the Army. And it was an honor to do it. I'm glad I didn't mess it up.
Yeah. How about COVID? COVID was sandwiched in there.
Yeah. So that actually, I'll tell you a funny story. I just came from a meeting at National Defense University. I reminded the guy who's a senior leader over there now. He was our chief of staff in the operations directorate at the time that 2020 rolled around.
Mm-hmm.
In November of 19, I was back from Afghanistan. We're doing kind of back then the Army did like a dog and pony show, public affairs tour for units that came back from overseas. So we're talking to like think tanks. We're doing a press thing. We go to the Hill, tell everybody what's going on right now in Afghanistan. So I knew I was going to this 07 job in the basement of the Pentagon. So I coordinate to go down there and meet my new boss. And I'm going to report whatever the first work day was in January of 2020. It's November of 19. So meet the new boss. He rushes off to a meeting. So I'm standing there talking to the chief of staff, and he knows I tell this story.
Right. Okay.
He's a prince of a man. He is a wonderful leader. Anyway, so I say, hey, chief, what are the hours down here? And he goes, oh, it's not too bad, sir. The first meeting for the boss with the G3 is about 08, and, we're usually gone by 1800. And I said, really? He goes, yeah. I said, that is inconsistent with what I've been told.
That is inconsistent with what I've been told.
And then the next question, I go, hey, what about working weekends, chief? And I'm not, I'm a guard guy. I'm used to working weekends.
Yeah.
I'm basically asking these questions because I'm trying to manage expectations for my wife.
Exactly. Right.
And he says, and this is the quote, he loves it when I tell this story. He says, and I quote, oh, sir, we never work weekends unless there's an emergency, end quote. So fast forward, my wife and I move our stuff back up to D.C. for our second tour in D.C. It's New Year's Eve, 19 to 20. Okay. All right. We're in the kitchen. It may not have been New Year's Eve. It was New Year's weekend. Anybody can figure this out, and you'll know why in a second. And we're in the kitchen of our friends that we had, best friends from the last time we were up there. And the husband's cooking dinner, and we open a bottle of champagne, and we toast to the new year and seeing each other again and all that friends do. And the wife of this couple runs her own think tank. They're actually both incredible people, but she supports the Department of Defense in doing that. So she stays very dialed in on all things geopolitical.
Okay.
And she reaches for her phone and got some sort of an alert or something, and she goes, oh my gosh, we just killed Qasem Soleimani, who, for those following along at home, was the commander of the Iranian Republican Guards Corps, IRCG. And we killed him with a drone strike when he landed in Baghdad airport.
Right.
She said that, and I was like, oh my God. And I'm reporting into work in like 2 days.
Right.
And
you only work weekends if there's an emergency.
If there's an emergency.
Right.
So I walk in, I have to be escorted because I don't have the clearances to get in there at that point. And it was like, I describe it as walking into a buzzsaw. My boss is like sending the global response force out the door. It was incredible.
Yeah. Was that 82nd Airborne Global?
I think it was at that time. Yeah. It was kind of funny. So I get to like day 2 and I'm like in processing, and everybody else is like hair on fire. And it starts snowing in DC, and you're well aware of what kind of havoc that causes.
Yes.
And he just looks at me at some point and goes, Matt, why don't you just go home? Because you're not really helping here.
That's right, exactly.
So I go home.
We'll figure out your new CAC card reader.
Right.
Yeah.
So I go home and I'm like sad sacking with my wife, who, as I mentioned earlier, Dave knows, her name is Laura. And I said something to her like, I just don't think they understand what I can contribute, you know? And she goes, okay, why don't you, it's only day 2. Why don't you, you know, see what happens after the snow melts, whatever. And then I went in day 3 and got fully employed and stayed that way for 24 months. Wow. And periodically, Laura would say, as I roll in at 2 a.m. or whatever on any given Tuesday, do you feel like you're fully employed now, Matt? You know? But we literally worked like every day. I mean, I don't know how my boss did it. We worked every day for months. And it went from, because then, as Dave alluded earlier, COVID rolled in. And we kind of, good, bad, or indifferent, for the Department of Defense, we kind of discovered that this was going to be a problem and started suggesting that to some folks. When people may not even remember this, when the cruise ships started coming back to the United States, people were sick on them. And the Office of the Secretary of Defense, people were like, hey, get those Army guys up here. They were talking about some virus.
Oh, geez.
And so it was like no good deed goes unpunished.
Right,
They're like, you guys figure this out. And then when it became a full-blown thing for the world, we became very close with the Surgeon General's office. And the leadership of the Department of the Army was like, okay, well, you guys discovered this, you just run it. And it's not like we scientifically discovered it. We were like, operationally, we're like, hey, we're going to have some problems here. So we ended up doing all the PPE policy, all this stuff, and then how to disseminate vaccines when they came around. And I mean, it was fascinating, but it was a lot of work. Yeah,
I'll bet.
And then, sprinkle in some civil unrest. And
little J6 here and there. Right. Exactly.
So
from there, you moved on to spend a year as the Deputy Director of Operations for the National Guard Bureau, which is a totally separate thing.
Yes.
And I remember offline, you told me that, one of the most interesting things about that was all the things you had no idea that the Guard was doing. And then you actually went so far as to say, like, maybe we shouldn't even talk about that subject because there's so much.
Yeah.
But I do have a general question that is, unclass, because I think your exact words were, this is probably all better off not discussed. So it's sort of like, okay. But I do have a question because I hear about this from my friends in the Marine Corps. And I hear about this when I meet young emerging leaders because they ask some version of this question like, well, if everything's over in the Middle East now, what am I really training for? And how do I keep people's attention? And I think it's probably even exacerbated or amplified in the reserve structure, right? The 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in a summer structure. Probably even harder, like, if the active duty doesn't have anything going on right now, what's left for the reserves? But it sounds like there is a lot of stuff that's going on. So what sort of advice do you have for the emerging leader who is facing a squad or a platoon of soldiers or Marines and saying to themselves, what are we really training for? My answer has always been, hey, when I came in, I thought like I missed the big one in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, right?
That's exactly what I was going to talk
about.
Right.
But, before you had like Grenada, Panama, Desert Shield, Somalia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, like 9/11, like there's always something, man. There's always something.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, and many of us have been in a similar situation or had fellow service members in a similar timing situation where it's the first person in the formation without a combat badge for the Army anyway.
Right.
And they're like, woe is me. I just missed the big one,
Sure.
To Dave's point, there's always going to be one.
Yeah.
And we just don't know when it's going to be. Back to the comment earlier about time. So I think the staff sergeant or sergeant first class or gunnery sergeant or lieutenant can help put that in context historically and say, hey, we didn't know 9/11 was going to happen.
Right.
Or that we'd be busy for decades.
Yeah.
And at a lesser scale, but there's still a lot of people slugging it out around the world, U.S. service members as we speak. So I think that the more junior the leader, the bigger the onus to train those basics and fundamentals and use time wisely, because a lot of us have paid in the past decades to learn those lessons.
Yeah.
Some have paid dearly for it, right? And that we owe it to those service members and families and the service members and families of the future,
Right.
to maximize those opportunities.
Real quick plug, I've been trying to get this effort underwritten by a corporate sponsor, so I'm asking for your help. If you or anyone you know is affiliated with a company that caters to the military or veterans community, I'd ultimately like to get this project underwritten by a company. So please reach out to me at themilloffice@gmail.com. You can DM me on Instagram at themilloffice or over my LinkedIn account. My personal account is David B. Armstrong, CFA, or the Mill Office LinkedIn account as well. Now back to the pod. Specific to the 1 week in a month, 2 week in the summer kind of contingent of all the services, do you think that probably the base level be ready thing is just mobilization? Like, it doesn't really matter what you could go get called to do. You can't do any of that if you can't get into a formation with all your gear on and get on a bus and go somewhere.
Yeah, like I call it like mobilization, like with a lowercase m, like not the enterprise, but the unit.
Yeah, the unit, right.
And knowing like where everything's at and where you got to put it and the load plan and all that kind of stuff. Like I actually would joke, we used to joke back in 2003, if you listen to the first part of this interview that Dave did with me, I think I talk about it. Like we left so fast from our armory and arrived in Kuwait so quickly, even from the MOB station. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks, it was less than a month. We joked, fortunately, it was a joke and not like more serious, that the book that the unit, it was a company, would write would be titled, "It's in the Connex, the story of our first deployment."
Right.
And invariably everything we needed when we got to northern Kuwait was in the Connex.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And everything we didn't need, it accompanied troops on the airplane.
Yeah. Right.
We just did, of course, back then nobody knew, really what we were doing anyway. Yes, the ability to self-mobilize is something that's worth paying some attention to.
Right.
Because you don't have to be a geopolitical strategist to know that when the next one comes, when, not if, back to the previous point, it's going to be fast.
I remember back to the biggest sort of almost, hey, you're going to mobilize thing was Hurricane Katrina. Like, nobody's thinking about that, right? And then all of a sudden, you've got flooded streets, and you've got, like, I remember hearing stories. I don't know if this is really true. So this is a little bit like urban legend, maybe, but I think it's grounded in some sort of truth. There was an Amtrak company down there, which is our version of that. Okay. And some enterprising company commander said, I don't care if we have national mobilization orders or not. I've got all these vehicles that can float and save people, and we're going out.
How about that?
And he basically self-mobilized the entire company. Probably I'm sure there was some tacit permission from above, like, we'll figure this all out, but just roll. And I just remember being on a conference call talking about, hey, within 48 hours, we may be putting all of our vehicles on flatbed railroad trucks, cars. And shipping stuff down to New Orleans, and we may be down there because we've got big 7-ton. We got all these vehicles that can do all this stuff. And thinking to myself, wow, 48 hours to get. I mean, it is going to take everybody 48 hours to get plane tickets and get that. Like, we're moving. This is going to happen super fast.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a really impactful, like, in my mind, thinking, like, I was scared that we wouldn't be able to. I was like, I don't know if we can get out the door in 48 hours.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, so those kind of things. So to your point, like, if you're not basically ready to go, you're not ready to go. And it like conjures up that scene from Heartbreak Ridge where Gunny Highway is like,
exactly,
I don't have the proper NVGs. We'll fill out the proper requisition forms, Gunny. Like that whole thing. They said, stand down.
But to the anecdote about the Amtrak company commander guy, it's like, well, I can remember asking the adjutant general one time, we're mobilized. Maybe it was that same hurricane. Yeah, it was that same hurricane I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you got any guidance for me, sir? He goes, help.
Right. Yeah.
Just help.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out. be moral, ethical, and legal, and go help.
Yeah, right,
You
right.
know?
So if anybody listening knows any sort of factual information about that Hurricane
That'd be
Katrina
nice
thing,
to
like
hear.
just drop me a email at
Maybe there's a MIL coin in it for that company commander.
yes, right, exactly. Track me down and prove that you were the company commander that made that call. Come on and tell me the story. I'll do a short episode on that.
That'd
But
be awesome.
you know, like I would like to think that I would have made the same decision. You know, I'd like to think, but you know, I'm sure there's a whole lot of backstory there. But yeah, so that brings us on to the final command that you
Final
had,
assignment.
right? So, but you know, in there, you got promoted to brigadier general. I think that was back when you were at the Pentagon
When I
after
went
your
to
brigade.
the Pentagon for
Right,
20,
right.
I
Yeah.
got promoted.
So just real quick, because I am rewinding for listeners, but like, what was it like when you found out you got picked up for BG? Like, was it a phone call? Like, tell me. I always get fascinated by how people actually find out. Who called them? What did they say? Did you think it was coming? Right?
So I knew I was in the running.
Mhm.
I could it's a formative event. I assume I'm not the only person affected like this. I could go to where I was standing. Like I can see it like it was yesterday.
Mhm.
Because even though you're told, hey, you're going to be in the running, the chances are tiny,
Right.
right? I mean, it's especially in the Marine Corps, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I was still on leave from Afghanistan. Get this call, like we were at dinner with friends. I got the call 3 times from my boss's boss. I'm like, oh man, we were in a loud restaurant. I didn't feel the phone, whatever. And I walk outside and call him back. And he says, hey, Matt, I'm calling on behalf of General so-and-so to ask you if you'd be willing to take this assignment in headquarters department of the Army. It comes with an 07 promotion. And he pauses for a second. He goes, you and I both know there's only one answer to this question. And I said, sir, I'm honored. I would love to take that job.
Yeah.
And then that's the buzzsaw of going to Army operations.
Yeah. I love that story because, like you said, I mean, the people who don't get selected for brigadier general, especially in the Marine Corps, I mean, they tell that I have never been told this joke because I've never been a general, but I've been told by generals that they make this joke when they go to their BG SOC brigadier general orientation. I don't know what it stands for, but it's that, right? It's like, hey, we're going to get all the new guys together and we're going to tell you the deal. Like, welcome to, thank you, sir, may I have another's initiation or something, right? So, and invariably they say the thing, which is you're driving up to 8th and I for your ceremony. And if the bus rolls over and everyone's killed, we will have 12 just as equally qualified people as you the very next day, right? It's like that razor thin of a thing.
Which is why it's so infuriating when men and women let it go to their head.
I would think so too. But then again, I try to put myself in their position and like, you just did 25 years and.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess my point is I was just lucky, because the next guy or gal is, to your point, equally as capable. You need like 4 decimal points to separate the 2 people from an ability standpoint. So it's like luck and timing. I was known because I had worked up there before. Somebody thought I could probably do it without messing it up by the numbers,
Right. But that's why I love asking the question, because there's a huge component of luck to it.
No doubt.
Right.
No doubt. And it's not, there's the adage about luck is preparation meeting opportunity or whatever.
Right. Or luck is a residual of.
Yeah. So that's all still valid, but there's still just some luck.
Yeah.
Had I not been the guy who got the assignment to be the rehab of the retirement plan and been involved, we didn't talk about this, but I was like the 06 guy for global force management reform. So you end up briefing 3 and 4 stars weekly, multiple, and you'd work on big things like that. You just become known.
Right.
And I know for a fact now in my career, that's the same thing if you're in the regular Army. It's the same thing if you're in the Marines. That's just how it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in the Marines where it's so small. I mean,
everybody knows.
Yeah. If I could make any wish come true, it would be to be a fly on the wall at the, executive offsite where they select the 3 stars and the commandant select who is going to replace them as 3 stars. Like that conversation must be nobody's reading old fitness reports and that, or old OERs and that. They're just talking about you because they all know you, right? They all know you. So,
of course, none of us know because none of those attendees ever tell anybody how that goes.
No, I've tried to liquor up a few of my friends and get some stories, and even under extreme drunkenness, I don't get any good story. I know nothing. Tried everything, but gonna have to resort to blackmail at some point. I think.
Put them on the spot on moments in leadership.
Right, exactly. By the way, I would never do that.
Never.
Off to be the commander of Joint Task Force North, right? We're in the 23-24 timeline, right?
23-24.
And we know this because you had a Marine Corps Sergeant Major Cordero, right? Who's been on the pod also. Yep. Really interesting. But you go to take command now as a major general, as a 2-star general.
Yep.
First of all, what was it like when you found out you were going to get that job? Almost same question as finding out BG. Like somebody must have called you and said, hey.
Yeah. So I'll say I was ready to retire. After the 3 years I had as an 07 in DC.
Right.
I was ready to retire. And then somebody said,
because you're basically a Lance Corporal in the Pentagon as a BG, right?
Yeah, it's like being a second lieutenant again.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's really, it's actually, I'll tell you a funny thing about that. So if you're visiting the Pentagon in that circumstance and you're a 1-star, it's like you got to disrobe and do all the stuff that the security guys make you do, like with Gen Pop there coming in the Metro visitor entrance.
Right, right.
Once you make 2-star, they don't even make you walk through the metal machine. They're like, oh, sir, right this way. It's like you're a made difference. Man at that woman at that point. Right. Just kind of funny cultural thing. Yeah. But anyway.
Hey, how did he become a 2-star general? Well, he took care of that thing, that thing. Right? It's made man. You don't hit a made man.
That's right. Anyway, so somebody senior came to me and was like, hey, would you be interested in this opportunity? I called a guy who had the job, found out there was a little bit more to it than I was aware of. Mm-hmm. Talked to my wife, which the
real general.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For all the listeners, if you haven't figured that out yet, make the main thing the main thing. Right. And we decided we would give it a shot if it was offered, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was not what to my phone call to my buddy comment, it was not, even after having had that conversation, I was not fully prepared for what that job entailed.
So tell listeners what that job is, because I don't know if everyone's truly familiar with Joint Task Force North.
Yeah.
Is it the old JTF 6?
It is.
Yeah, okay.
It is. So it's been there for 35 years, based at Fort Bliss, Texas, providing DoD support for the vast majority of that time, the law enforcement community, primarily the U.S. Border Patrol, right? But several months before I got there, the previous U.S. NORTHCOM commander told my predecessor, hey, get down into Mexico and organize the interagency against what doctrinally we call transnational criminal organizations, what most people refer to as cartels.
Right.
So my predecessor started that Herculean task of literally herding the cats. And I always, anybody who's senior will appreciate this comment, without any legal or fiscal authority to direct compliance, right? So you're literally, back to the coin thing, you're building a coalition of the willing.
Cajoling people into doing what you want.
Yeah. I mean, it is very different from direct leadership at the rifle platoon level.
Yeah, right.
I found it to be tremendously rewarding. Number one, the education of getting exposed to 18, the last time I counted, different federal entities that
Name 3.
All of the intelligence community. U.S. Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, fascinating. The FBI, obviously.
Yeah.
The U.S. Marshal Service, incredibly small, incredibly capable.
Yeah.
And then just the State Department, of course, which is responsible for running the relationship with the other nation.
Right.
Which is a pretty tricky relationship in my observation.
Right. Special Operations Command a little bit maybe, or maybe not?
No, not at that time.
Okay.
We're mostly working through some of those agency partners across LE, law enforcement, and IC, who would then work with Mexican partners.
Gotcha.
To do bad things to bad people.
Talk to me a little bit about, to the extent that you can, DoD support of, say, Border Patrol, because there's got to be, and that there must have been some really great leadership vignettes that came out of that.
Yeah, one of them goes to how I spent the last 6 months in my career.
Right. We're just going to jump right in there, aren't we?
Yeah, so DoD supports the U.S. Border Patrol. Two things. Number one, I personally have nothing but respect for the U.S. Border Patrol on the southwest border, which is my only data point with the U.S. Border Patrol. Those men and women operate literally alone and unafraid across vast distances. The physical, anybody who's been in the Southwest United States knows this, the physical environment is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
That's before you get into the human factors, right?
Sure, just the rattlesnakes.
Yeah. I mean, just driving off a cliff. I mean, you name it. It's just hard. And then there's the people they come into contact with, not all of whom are just looking for a nice new life in the United States.
You don't say.
Yeah, it's weird. I know. So like I am not articulate enough as I stumble for my words to express my admiration for U.S. Border Patrol agents and what they do for our country. The second aspect, though, is that I was in that position during the tail end of the Biden administration, and I had very clear guidance on what the civilian leadership of the U.S. Department of Defense wanted me to accomplish in terms of ramping down support to the Border Patrol. I think perhaps some of our Border Patrol partners could not or chose not to separate the idea of, hey, I am doing a mission that I was lawfully directed to do, and I am complying with guidance from higher. And that includes minimize the $500 million a year we're spending from the Department of Defense's budget to help you guys, while still having the utmost respect for what you're doing.
Right.
Nobody ever asked me, well, Matt, how much money do you think we should give to the Border Patrol? That wasn't my role in that situation. And what that resulted in, which you're tracking, is a complaint against me for dereliction of duty, which is I don't mind telling your listeners, I was shocked when I was told that was the complaint against me.
Yeah. Let's dig into that, because I know there's a story there.
Yeah. So the context of it was, hey, Smith is mean. And because he's mean, he has damaged the interagency relationship with the U.S. Border Patrol. And as a result of that, he's derelict.
Wow, what a stretch. I mean, I imagine
Yeah, I mean, so any of your listeners have ever been investigated? I've been investigated before. It's unpleasant, even if you know you haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
But I was never, ever would have anticipated a charge like that.
Wow. What's the background on that?
Well, what I think the background is at some point months before that, we received a new staff member on our team, regular Army colonel.
When you say regular Army, you mean active duty?
Active duty, okay. Yeah. He was not within the Army's height weight standards. As I like to put it somewhat crudely deliberately crudely for effect, Helen Keller could tell he was not within Army height weight standards. And, using the Army communication style of candor, I sat him down, put things in writing, hey, this is, it's bad for you from a health standpoint. And this will sound a little weird, he's a good guy. Like, I think his heart is pure. My supposition is that he did not like being held accountable. My frustration is that I don't know why me as the 2-star guy had to be the first one to hold him accountable.
An Army colonel, he just didn't get fat overnight.
No, yeah, he didn't. That didn't happen while he was on PCS leave.
Right.
From his last assignment.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty frustrating situation to have to deal with. And then to have that weaponized against me in the way it was.
Right.
During literally the last 6 months of 26 years of active duty, almost 32 years of total service.
Enjoying Moments in Leadership? Help the project get more guests and reach more listeners by leaving a 5-star rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It literally takes like 5 or 10 seconds to do it. and the reviews really help me to continue bringing inspiring stories from senior military leaders. Additionally, when these guests see that it's popular or hear about it around their commands, it helps me get them on as guests as well. So thanks. So here's the real important question, because you said before, like if anybody's ever been investigated, people do. I know other 2-star generals that have been through investigations. I know lieutenant colonels that have gone through boards of inquiry. I mean, these things happen all the time. So someone, more than one, someone's plural, okay, is listening to this and saying, shit. So my question to you is, how do you handle it? What are some of the things that you learned about the right way to handle if you are the subject of an investigation?
So many are familiar with the acronym CYA, or for Call Your Attorney.
Okay, that's good. I've never heard that's good.
She saved my bacon.
Now, is this a JAG? Is this your staff JAG?
Army, no. So the important distinction here, the staff JAG he's a company guy. Right. So he's working for the organization. He's not working for me personally.
Right.
So I got a trial defense attorney.
Civilian?
Army lieutenant, regular Army lieutenant colonel.
Okay, so you're not
active duty lieutenant colonel.
So you didn't hire somebody.
No.
Personally. Okay, because I do know some people that go through investigations end up ultimately hiring.
Yeah, that's an option.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, I had my organizational attorney, a Marine.
Oh, really?
Who went to an accredited law school.
Oh.
Emory Law, no less.
No kidding. We'll talk about Emory here in a few minutes, but that's great.
And anyway, he kind of used his network and found out that this lieutenant colonel was like very good.
Okay. So essentially a defense attorney.
She's my defense attorney. Yeah. So I'll tell a quick story to make the point about defense attorneys. Like I was at a course at Fort Huachuca many years ago, which is where the Army teaches intelligence stuff. It was at the height of the wars, and the course was being taught by a contractor who had served for years and years and years, an LA police officer. And at some point he said something about attorneys, and the crowd of military students starts poo-pooing on attorneys. And then he pauses for a sec. He goes, "Have any of you ever been accused of murder?" And we're like, "No, what are you talking about?" He goes, "I've been charged twice for shootings in the line of duty."
Wow.
And he goes, "Until you're in a situation like that, you can't quite fully appreciate the benefits of the legal profession."
Yeah, right.
And that's how I felt coming out of this. Like if it had not been for this super duper JAG lieutenant colonel who, best I could tell, poured her heart and soul into keeping me out of trouble, I perhaps would have retired at a lesser rank.
It's always a possibility.
Always
if like you said, luck, right? If the luck had gone against you.
And what ultimately happened is the Tuesday before my Friday retirement ceremony, which was on my Friday, February 28th, retired effective March 1st, my former 4-star boss called me and told me he was throwing out the whole thing.
Okay, so I got some questions.
Sure.
All right. So your boss is the Northcom commander? 4-star
Air Force.
Yeah. Okay. So I've always had relationships with my bosses where I could call them up. So this thing, do you call him and say like, "Hey, sir, like..."
I couldn't, because once you're accused, this is like one of the flaws of the system, and how, in my singular opinion, I think it's been perverted. Right? It's like once you're accused of something like that, you can't talk to the commander because he or she is going to be the one that makes the decision on the investigation.
So you have no idea.
You're like guilty until proven innocent. It's the exact opposite of what our Constitution
says.
Right,
and you can't take your boss's temperature on what they,
nothing.
Okay.
At the time, his deputy, the 3-star, was also a Georgia National Guardsman who had been my boss for years and years, or boss's boss for years and years. So he couldn't even talk to me. So it's like you're on the land of misfit toys, just alone and unafraid.
Okay, but you're still commanding something.
Yes.
Right. So how do you get guidance and things like that from your boss when you're not allowed to talk to him?
So that, I mean, you can talk about that. It's not like there's a gag order. I just can't talk about the investigation stuff.
Okay. So, but back to my question, which is, okay, other than call your attorney, you're still in charge of
Thousands and
thousands of
thousands of people. There's people in a foreign country doing all
right.
sorts of stuff.
Right. Okay, I think I would be so pissed that I wouldn't be able to see straight. I don't think I would be able to command very well, being that, now this is just me and my personality, right? This is why I was lucky to actually achieve the rank of lieutenant colonel, because I would have
passion.
Yeah, I would have gotten so angry. I don't know if I would have been able to see straight, which is really the genesis of my question, which is like, how can you convey the things that you learned about maintaining your composure and still leading when everybody in the room is looking at you and saying like, that guy's under investigation?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I did.
Yeah. Maybe that's the answer. You just have to.
You have to. Yeah. You know, you think about like feats of valor on fields of battle since time immemorial. How did that guy do that? He just had to at the time. And then I'm not trying to elevate what I experienced in response to your question or lower any of those feats of valor, but I just don't know how else to make an analogy.
Yeah. Well, it's moral courage.
I guess.
I think it is.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was hard, I'll tell you that. And there was one particular night where I was sad sacking a little bit, and it was, it was dark. Nobody was around.
Yeah.
A senior NCO at just the right time came to see me and he basically said, "Hey, sir, we just want you to know where everybody's behind you."
That's got to make you feel good.
It made me brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah.
Because it was hard.
Maybe that's a lesson that listeners should be taking away from, is if you see one of your commanders struggling with something, like the power of a kind word like that can go a long way, right? Maybe the lesson here is for the people listening who aren't part of the investigation.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he literally, like, just in the span of seconds, like, completely changed how I was feeling about myself and my career and all that.
Right. Okay, because I've got to imagine it's really hard. Bosses always say they have an open door policy, right? But that door gets a lot smaller the higher the rank is, like next thing you know, you're like looking through a speakeasy hole, but
actually, so just hold that thought for a second. I'll tell you a funny story. So at some point, related to this, at some point I get asked, "Well, man, how come you didn't have the HHC company commander handle?" "Well, sir, we don't have an HHC company commander. It's a JTF. By doctrine, it's established for short-term periods. Now, in this case, we've been doing it for 35 years.
Yeah.
Had we had a company commander, he or she would have dealt with that. But I was the first person with commanding in the third line of my signature block for this soldier.
Yeah, sure.
So it was just this really hard, bizarre situation because, as I used to remind my former 4-star boss, this is just a temporary mission. We've been doing it for like 185 years along the Southwest border.
Yeah, right, exactly.
In some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah. But that open door policy does it. I mean, if I'm a battalion commander and a sergeant walks up to my hatch and knocks on the door and says, "Hey, sir, got a second?" Like, that's right, sergeant.
Yeah. Yes.
But like, for somebody to walk into a 2-star general's office, like there's probably a desk and a desk and a desk in front of that. Like there's probably a chief
like
of staff.
Controlled access.
Right, exactly.
Like that.
Like how does, I
mean, still have to have it though.
Yeah, right.
But like it was used periodically.
I think that's really what I just took away from you saying, which is like, hey, don't feel like there's that wall between you and another person. You're still human beings. Like, and passing along the kind of, it may get harder and harder the higher rank it is, but for somebody to have done that to a 2-star general obviously made a huge difference.
I mean, it was an E9, it was somebody who could walk in without question.
Yeah.
But it was pretty.
Was justice served?
I don't think so necessarily.
Let Cordero handle that.
Needless to say, he was very helpful during this entire time.
What a good man.
He was also pretty angry about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people were. So I think for the most junior listener, as I was kind of preparing my rebuttal to these accusations, I had a conversation with a retired Army 3-star career infantryman, special forces guy, during which he told me about his own situation when he was post-brigade command colonel up for 07 and he gets hit with a complaint, delayed his promotion for a year, if I remember correctly. The point being two things. A, the adage of the higher you go up the flagpole, the more your ass is exposed is true.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes with the territory. So that's part of that, decision-making process for a family unit.
Yeah. Right.
I think of, I can remember saying to Laura, hey, this we can get promoted to 2-star here, but this is like the Southwest border. Like there is risk going and taking this job.
Sure.
Now, I didn't think it would turn out the way.
Wasn't that kind of risk you were thinking about? Some
exactly.
fat colonel, right? But
right.
You were thinking about some bandito.
Yeah. Or politically, the winds of whatever change. And you're like, hey, you get out of here. You're fired.
Right.
The other part of that this 3-star drove home for me after telling me of his own struggle with this type of thing was he goes, Matt, you know what the irony of this is? I said, no, sir. What is it? He goes, if you had looked the other way on the failure to achieve the standard, then you truly would have been derelict in your duty.
That's a great point.
He goes, your duty, as you said earlier, Dave, is to the institution.
Yeah.
So I'm like, guy's not within the standard. I got to give me the standard. Let me hold them to this standard in the right way. And, I'm not talking about like belittling the guy. I'm like, hey, we got to get you to a doctor. We got to do, all the right things to get you healthier.
Right. Especially something so cut and dry.
Yeah.
I mean, there is you're this tall and there's a scale right there.
Exactly.
Right.
And for years, what I found out as part of the discovery process that my attorney did, where you get, redacted versions of all these statements and stuff, is the answer was, oh, this is related to my wounds in combat, which is accurate. He was wounded, overseas. So I call the unit physician's assistant. I'm like, hey, give me the chapter and verse on height, weight, and wounds in combat. She's like, oh, I don't even have to do that, sir. I can tell you. I was like, okay. So in the Army, the only time we waive height, weight requirements is if you're pregnant or you're an amputee.
Huh?
So this commissioned officer had basically been deceiving people and hoping nobody would check for years.
Yeah.
Years. I mean, it was really, I don't know, I'm very torn about the whole situation because this will sound stupid when I say it. I like the guy as a person, but I don't know how he reconciled all this within himself.
Yeah. That's his own struggle.
Yeah, that's true. But the key thing for the listeners is that you're derelict if you don't hold somebody to the standard.
That is,
I thought that was brilliant.
It's real, and it's 100% true. And I didn't even think about it that way, so now I'm embarrassed. But because you're absolutely right. I mean, really, that's. I
was just like, this is the right thing to do. The guy's clearly not within the standard.
That is the point. Yeah.
And as I provided a very personal example in the first podcast we did, all those standards are there because somebody learned something, and they were all put in place to try and mitigate risk for those of us that are coming up in the world and haven't experienced whatever that problem was.
Right.
Right. Like why we separate the blasting caps from the. Right. So when the caisson bumps on the road, it doesn't blow up.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
But not blasting caps, fuses. Sorry.
I wasn't going to call you out on the pod, but whatever. Yes, you're a grunt, so Speaking of doing the right thing, let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah,
because this is really cool.
It is cool. Thanks for the opportunity to do it, and thanks for your involvement in what I'm about to describe. So, Dave, for those that don't know, it is a moderately successful entrepreneur, and
scraping along, man,
was willing to give of his time as a veteran entrepreneur to share some of his lessons learned with the students that I am now responsible for at the Gozueta Business School at Emory University, which now runs one of only 2 Masters in Business for Veterans programs in the United States. The other is 13 years old. It's at the University of Southern California, not University of South Carolina, where Dave went to school.
Whatever. They got a crappy football team.
I like to say Emory football still undefeated.
I know. And listen, Things are looking like you're going to have another undefeated season this year.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's amazing. But anyway, so our dean comes from USC. And
there's no football team at Emory for those of you who didn't get
just
the
for
joke,
those
so,
not
right.
tracking. Yeah. The dean comes over like 3 years ago and says to this, my predecessor, hey, you got all these veterans around the Southeast. Why don't you make one of these programs for them? And the beauty of the program is if you're a senior leader, like let's call it 10 years of service or more, you can still be serving or whatever. My predecessor figured out how to set up this program so you could get an accredited master's degree from a top 20 business school. There's 1,800 business schools in the United States, by the way. And if you show up with your GI Bill, it triggers a whole bunch of other great programs to support veterans. And then and the school throws some scholarship money pretty typically. And you just come out of this year of hard academics with a world-class business degree to pair with your military leadership experience. And it is proven to be, at least initially, a very powerful combination in the civilian work world.
Yeah.
Hiring bosses seem to like it.
Okay, so here was where I got it wrong. So when you asked me to come down and talk to the group of your current cohort, I had this preconceived notion that I was going to be walking into a room full of captains with 5 years of service that just got out.
Yeah.
And had their undergraduate. It wasn't at all. I was embarrassed to have that preconceived notion. It was almost, I stereotyped it.
Well, that's what a full-time MBA program is like.
Right.
I think we were both there. We have both had that experience. I was 26 or 7 or something when I did that. But this program was specifically set up for more senior leader, more experienced leaders.
And enlisted too.
And enlisted, right? So,
that was what I was kind of getting at, which I was kind of shocked at.
Percentage of the class, almost half, are senior enlisted leaders or former senior. Actually, some still serving, which is pretty powerful. That's one of the more heartwarming parts of it for me, just to get sappy for a second, is, if you think back to when the GI Bill was created, when everybody came back from World War II,
right?
It transformed lives, it transformed American society.
Yeah.
And the business of higher education these days, there's very little of that left.
Right.
So one of the things I really like about what our school has done is the potentially transformative aspect of a senior NCO getting a world-class business degree and going on to do amazing things.
Yeah. And your wife's a graduate from the
she is. Yeah.
Quizetta.
The smarter of the two of us, for sure.
Well, we're in the podcast room here. Nobody else heard you say it, but So what are some of the things that makes the program different than, say, an MBA program? Like what is it that somebody's gonna?
Yeah. So it's basically an MBA without electives.
Okay.
Right. So you get all the core intro to finance, intro to marketing, intro to strategy, intro to financial accounting, managerial accounting, all that. But there's no concentration that happens.
Okay.
Earlier today over at NDU, one of the professors was like, well, what type of role would be a good outcome for your graduates? And I think the easiest way to answer that from a civilian standpoint is a COO.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because you got these experienced military leaders that are just good ops people, regardless of where they came from. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, pick an MOS. We're all operators of one type or another when you think about a civilian business context. And you undergird the experience with the world-class business education, they turn out to do a pretty good job.
Right.
It's pretty awesome.
So somebody that's interested in this, what are the steps that they take to apply and learn more about it? I mean, it's going to be website. I get all that.
Yeah,
we'll put that stuff in the show notes. But
yeah. So this is interesting. Having gotten an MBA many, many years ago, applicants seem concerned about taking one of the standardized tests.
Yeah.
So we don't do that because the standardized tests exist for the rankings process for full-time MBA programs, which we are not.
Right.
So it's really just a lot of interpersonal relationship building with applicants to see. The first thing is this right for them? Right. So I always ask, what do you want a business degree for? Depending on the answer, I'm kind of like an amateur education officer for a unit. I'll like
Yeah,
steer them
right.
towards whatever. And whether it's at Emory's Business School or not, I don't necessarily care, because I'm not going to steer some young man or woman wrong. I'm not going to have them utilize this awesome asset that they might have if they still have their GI Bill for something that's not right for them.
Right.
So that's the first thing. What do they want to do with it? What career do they think they want to be in? And then we kind of look at what their leadership experience is, because that is the key component that we're delivering to the hiring person or manager on the back end. And then, because it's a top 20 business school, what is their quantitative ability?
Yeah.
Right. So there's one guy I talked to last week who's like, hey, I'm an Arabic linguist. I'm like, okay, I hear that's not that quantitative, but it does indicate the ability to do hard things.
Yeah. Right.
And I think your listeners can all get this point. Nobody's going to water down what's being delivered in the classroom because the audience just happens to be all veterans.
Yeah, right.
And none of us want anybody to water anything down just because we happen to be veterans.
Right. What were you doing over at NDU today?
I was trying to increase awareness of the program.
Okay.
So I went and talked to their senior leadership and said, hey, here's what we're doing. It's brand new. It's not a Herculean lift, because once people hear about it, they're like, man, this is awesome.
Right.
And the fiscal things in terms of setting this up that my predecessor did, it's fantastic. It's like, it is all of the goodness that our veterans have earned in terms of the Department of Veterans Affairs and potentially transforming their lives.
Yeah.
So I just want people to know it's out there.
Right. What sort of access do the students have to things like Career Center and career resources?
Yeah, they get
all the same, right?
Yeah. So I think Guzweta Business School at Emory University has the 5th ranked career management center this year.
Oh, wow. That's
right. So, they're very good. It's a national thing, all the top schools are like that, they have national reach. So it's not, somebody doesn't have to live in Atlanta
right
to do this. And both of the first 2 classes, about a third travel from sometimes across the United States.
Okay. If you're able to chip in a little bit to help the project, please head over to my Supercast support page at mill.supercast.com or through the link in the show notes. Every little bit helps. Now back to the pod. And they travel 1 weekend a month, kind of like?
To every other Friday, Saturday.
Okay.
I wasn't prepared for this either. The interesting thing is that A minority of the students are still serving in uniform.
Okay.
B, everybody by extension has a day job of some type.
Right.
Most have provided unsolicited feedback about how awesome it is to come in for a class weekend, learn, and then go back to the day job and apply what they learned.
Yeah.
Like last year, we had one guy who works for UPS, coincidentally in Atlanta, but like he got promoted twice during the academic year because he was bringing so much to the table at his job. He actually told me he was a former sailor, a junior enlisted sailor, actually. He said his boss was like, where are you getting all this stuff? He's like, you know how you let me take off every other Friday? Boss like, yeah. He goes, that's what I'm doing.
That's cool. What's the biggest challenge that you have, and why is it that you don't have enough Marines in the program?
The biggest challenge is that our students and alums now don't appropriately represent the demographics of the Department of Defense, right? So my predecessor was an Army guy. I'm an Army guy. We're heavily overweighted in the Army. We all know
because the word's getting around in the Army, right?
Is,
like, so how do we get the word out to the other services?
Well, that's why I'm doing all these road trips. I'm just trying to. So I don't know if any of your listeners are Navy SEALs, but as a Ranger guy, I was talking to somebody in Special Operations Command last week, and I said, "Hey, I don't like Navy SEALs as much as the next guy, but they deserve the opportunity." So I'll take
I'll get some comments from the
hate
listeners.
Yeah, right.
We'll see what Dave Isons has to say about that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But that's good. I'm actually making inroads into their kind of their transition enterprise for when they either ETS or retire,
Right.
just so they can be aware of it too. I'm obviously made a joke about it, but it's very serious. It's
Sure.
a great opportunity.
Yeah. So where do people go to learn more?
So if you Google Masters in Business for Veterans, you will only get University of Southern California and Emory.
Right. And we know what we think about University of Southern California. It's been
Your
established.
words,
That's
not
right.
mine.
Exactly. Right. So, great. Well, that's awesome. I hope some people hear this and want to learn more about it. I was really impressed when I went down there, the level of conversations that I was having with the folks down there, just, free for all kind of that free for all moment we were all hanging around. I was really impressed.
Yeah, it's a good crew.
I wasn't talking to a class of brand new MBA students. I was talking to a class of seasoned veterans who have a ton of experience under their belt, a lot of diverse experiences, and they were there to now take those experiences and hone them through some master's level business education.
Yeah. And you gave them great advice.
I don't remember what I said.
It was about learning the language of
learning
business.
language of accounting. That's right.
And accounting.
Right,
yeah.
right. Accounting is a foreign language, and you have to learn it if you want to be successful in business. Yeah. So
I got two closing thoughts, and I appreciate you letting me talk about what I'm doing
I'm just
now.
going to edit this all out.
So A, it's awesome to still be amongst veterans.
Yeah.
And I may have joked with you, Dave, about how Laura, my wife, everybody is like, man, you don't even have like a real job. You're still with veterans. It's like you're on step 3 of some 12-step program for retiring guys, But anyway, it's awesome to keep contributing, albeit small population. Not everybody can get into that level of academic rigor, but for those who can, we want them to know.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a thing down in Columbus, Georgia, near Fort Benning for the Ranger Regiment.
Okay.
And one of the Rangers was like, hey, sir, why a business degree? And my kind of off the cuff comment back to him and the whole audience was, based on my observation, human interaction is governed by 3 things on the face of our planet: war, religion, and business. I said, you got a little bit of a taste of the first one. I don't see you going to theology school by the looks of you. You may want to learn a thing or two about business, whether you come to Emory or not.
Right.
It drives the world.
Yeah.
And even guys or gals as veterans who want to go into the nonprofit space, that's still a business.
Yeah.
Especially other people, as you know, people are giving you their money. They expect you to do something with it.
Right.
So I just think it's not an obvious thing for military folks to look at business from a higher education standpoint, but I think it's very powerful. And many of us, to include myself, who got an MBA and then went back on active duty, I thought I made a bad investment for years and years and years and years. But it was an incredible benefit in terms of knowing how the world works.
Right. Yeah.
Back to the previous point, I just want everybody else to do better than I ever did.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I see people struggle with is, leadership is not the same thing as business.
That is
but
true.
Business has leadership in it.
Sure.
And so in order to bridge that gap, there's got to be some, if you didn't come out of an undergraduate with business, you've got to go back and round out that experience with figuring out how to run a business, because you can be a great leader, but if you don't know how to run the business will go out of business.
Yes,
Exactly. So.
And I don't know if your listeners know this. I'm involved with the guys that do a bunch of research on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, sure.
To use your example, veterans are more highly predisposed towards entrepreneurialism than the rest of our society. I can't quote the stats. I could get you to somebody who can.
Right.
So that, think of Black Rifle Coffee Company. I mean, think about all these, veteran-owned businesses out there. There's just a lot of goodness there for our community once they take off the uniform.
Yeah.
So thanks for the opportunity to talk.
Absolutely. So Mr. Matt Smith, formerly of the Major General United States Army National Guard.
That's right.
Variant. Great to have you in here. When we go to dinner later, I'm going to tell you my JTF story, because I'm not going to tell it on the
statute of limitations.
It was a JTF 6. I was a young first lieutenant.
Every once in a while, I run into somebody old enough to have been involved with JTS 6.
I was one of the original ones.
How about that?
Yeah.
I didn't know you were that old.
Modified grooming standards for 6 months. Oh, yeah.
Nice.